All right, well, it's 5 after, so if I get started, people trickle in, they trickle in. I'm pretty conversational, so I'm just going to start talking. If you guys have a question, feel free to shoot your hand up, and we'll do another, Q&A at the end. But don't be afraid of, interrupting me. I just kind of start talking. So raise your hand up, and we'll try the best we can. Because if you don't understand it, that probably means that other people aren't understanding what I'm saying either. So I'll try to talk slow enough, because I like to talk fast. So if you guys raise your hand, happy to answer questions. I'll power right through the presentation. But yeah, so we're going to talk about brewery wastewater management. Can you guys hear me fine? Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just going to talk without the mic then. So I'm from Champlin Associates. We'll give a little background to them. We're going to talk about wastewater basics, brewery wastewater specifically, how to address your wastewater. We're going to look at some examples of brewery wastewater and kind of how it can escalate to such a big thing. We'll look at some treatment technologies and then contact info, additional stuff. So yeah, I'm from Champlin Associates. My name is Alec Disler. We've been in business since '72. We are first and foremost a pumps and controls company. So we do a lot of municipal water and wastewater pumps, controls, instrumentation, all that kind of jazz, which essentially just means we work a lot with towns and cities. We provide solutions for water and wastewater, like I said, pumps, controls, servicing, water and wastewater treatment. We're based in Vermont, but we support all of Northeast plus beyond for treatment. We actually just did a brewery in Arizona, so we're kind of all over the place for treatment side. But our bread and butter is dealing with municipalities, so we kind of understand why they're so upset sometimes about brewery wastewater. So, brewery wastewater, why should you care? Why does the municipality care? Why does the EPA care? Why does anyone care about what's coming out of a brewery? As a brewer, the mindset is it's just organic material coming out of a brewery. It's just yeast and hops. It's not like you're dumping a bunch of arsenic or something down the drain that's going to go and poison the water supply. What's the big deal? And also, as a brewer, you guys want to brew beer. You don't want to be a wastewater, experts at the same time. You got the thing that you love. Let's focus on that. This whole other side of the business, that's kind of the icky stuff. We don't want to do it. So to understand why your wastewater is such a big problem, we need to go over the basics of wastewater itself. So the two main ways that municipalities measure wastewater, or two of the main ways they measure water and wastewater, is with flow, and that's just a measure of literally how many gallons it is. It's the hydraulic measurement in gallons per day, the amount of the waste we're producing. And there's also this thing called biological oxygen demand, or BOD. BOD is the organic measurement, or how strong your wastewater is. A really good way to think about it is food in the waste stream. So it measures the dissolved oxygen needed for microorganisms to break down organic material in your wastewater. So if you think about a municipal plant, what's going on in their waste stream is they have all these microbes that live in the waste stream, and then when the BOD comes in, the food comes in, those microorganisms start consuming the BOD, start consuming the nutrients, the sugars, carbohydrates, whatever, that's coming down the drain. At the same time, they're consuming oxygen in the system, and that's kind of the measurement of BOD, how much oxygen is consumed when that food comes in. What can happen is if there's too much food coming in, that population can skyrocket, and then they're not able to get enough oxygen into their system. Those microorganisms will hit this kind of maximum threshold. They'll consume all the oxygen in the system at one time. They'll all suffocate and die, killing the entire plant. So then they have to go and scoop up sludge from another plant and reseed theirs. It's a whole process, and it's very expensive. And it's not a good situation. But for BOD, the number that you should keep in your mind, and it's a very important number, is 300. So 300 milligrams per liter is typically recognized as residential strength sewer. So wastewater treatment plants, they have a design capacity both for flow and BOD. They typically measure that in BOD pounds per day. So some quick math that might be helpful for you guys if you want to figure out what your pounds of BOD are. It's millions of gallons per day times the BOD loading times 8.34. 8.34 is just the weight of water. And that gives you your pounds of BOD a day. So an example, let's say in your town you have a 1 million gallon per day treatment plant. They're probably going to be designed for 300 milligrams per liter per day at average residential strength. Times that by 8.34, that gives you 2,500 pounds of BOD treatment per day. So that's the capacity of that treatment plant. On the flip side, your town should be measuring your output the same way in pounds of BOD. So my wife's name was Kate. She couldn't be here, but she wanted to be part of the presentation. So I threw her there as Kate's Kegs. So just an example, Kate's Kegs is a 30-barrel brew house. They discharge about 5,000 gallons a day of wastewater at an average BOD of 5,000. So we take your 5,000 in millions of gallons per day, so that's 0.005 times 5,000 times 8.34, gives us 208.5 pounds of BOD a day that's coming out of that brewery. An average residential home produces half a pound of BOD a day. So that means that Kate's Kegs equals 417 homes worth of BOD capacity to that wastewater treatment plant. Like we saw, 5,000 barrel brew house can, if you have even worse process control, it can be up to 500 homes worth of capacity at the plant. Same with TSS. TSS stands for total suspended solids. We'll get into that a little bit later. But your brewery could easily equal, 75 homes plus worth of capacity at your treatment plant. So now we kind of see how much of an impact a brewery can have. Let's see if we can get some. What's the average brewery? What's going to be coming out of your facility? So typically, 4 to 6 gallons of wastewater are generated per gallon of beer produced. So if you guys have really great process control, you're really checking your numbers and make sure you don't have the extra spills, all the kind of stuff, you could be down between 2 to 4 gallons of wastewater per gallon of beer. If you're not really doing anything, you're letting the water flow, you could be upwards of 7 to even over 15 gallons of wastewater produced per gallon of beer produced. Well, on average, you guys are probably somewhere between 4 to 6 if you're doing any type of process control. On the flip side, BOD, or that biological oxygen demand, typical brewery process water, on average, you can average somewhere between 3 to 7,000 milligrams per liter of BOD. If you have really great process control, you're side streaming a lot of your solids, you're taking out some of the really high strength liquids, make sure you don't have any spilled beer, all that kind of stuff. You could be somewhere between 2,500 to 3,500 milligrams per liter. If you're not doing anything, you're putting all your solids on the drain, your spent grains and everything, you're probably upwards of 10 to 15,000 milligrams per liter of BOD on average. And another kind of interesting note, beer itself, if you just take your beer and dump it down the drain, your beer is probably about 75,000 milligrams per liter of BOD, which means that 1 gallon of beer equals half a pound of BOD, which is the same loading as a residential home. So just for you guys who, if you have something goes wrong and you got a batch of bad beer, don't open the floodgates and dump it down because you're going to overload something. Other things about brewery wastewater, your pH is probably going to vary somewhere between 3 to 10. It's kind of some pretty wide swings coming out of your facility. Beer itself is pretty acidic, so you're probably going to hang out in the 3 to 5.5-ish range just from the beer. But you're also going to use some more basic chemicals. Oftentimes, the pH is one of the first things that your municipality looks for to have it regulated before it hits them. They don't want these crazy swings in pH. They also don't want consistent acidic stuff going through their pipes. So that might be the first thing that your town asks you to do is, hey, give us a neutral pH. And then maybe we'll add some more stuff later. Another thing that your town might do off the bat is looking at your TSS, or your total suspended solids. All that means it's the chunks in your brewery wastewater. If it's dissolved, it can't be a TSS. But that can be your spent grains, your trub, your yeast, your hop residue, all that kind of stuff will add up to your TSS. Oftentimes, municipalities will say, okay, make sure you give us a basic pH and don't put anything down the drain that's bigger than half an inch or something like that. And so that would involve some pH adjustment equipment and some screening to make sure you're not putting additional chunks down the drain. So we kind of saw the problem a little bit from the brewery side. What's the municipality? How do they respond to brewers in particular? Unfortunately, one of the main things we see from them is this tax them into submission mentality. You say, hey, they're getting a big impact on our plant. They should pay for that impact. And so we're going to jump down their throat. We're going to charge them a ton of money. We've seen people charge upwards of $10,000 a month just for being able to discharge to their municipal plant. It could be more, it could be less, but often it's a growing response that we're seeing from town to town. At least try to get, in their mind, we're going to recoup some of our money that the brewer has, impacted us with. Those taxes typically come from surcharge fees. We say with a high strength surcharge fee. That's typically based on pounds of BOD being sent to the plant. That's the best way to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of towns also just give a flat milligram per liter amount. It might say, hey, anything over 300 milligrams per liter, we're going to tax you on. Why not call tax, we'll surcharge you on for anything over that 300. Some of your towns might be a little bit less than that, might be a little bit more than that, depending on the municipality. So you have to talk to them and say, hey, what's my discharge limit? Am I at 250? Am I at 600? What can I do? A lot of times they'll say, hey, here's a flat amount. If you go over that, we're charging you. Obviously, that can be super expensive. Oftentimes, or not oftentimes, sometimes we see that municipalities won't even take a drop from your plant if it's over a certain milligrams per liter threshold. If it's over 300 milligrams per liter, we don't want it. Take it somewhere else, do something else with it. We're not taking it from your facility. That often causes you guys to put a big storage tank in the ground, call up the local pumper company. They're going to suck it up and haul it and drive it to whatever municipality is going to take that waste. And that municipality is probably going to put a surcharge on you as well for taking the brewery waste. So obviously that's going to be super expensive. We're dealing with a brewery in Vermont right now. I'm based out of Vermont. We're dealing with a brewery in Vermont that they can be on, they're on municipal sewer, and their plant has hydraulic capacity. They can take the actual water from them, but they won't take it because it's so high strength. So they're currently having to divert all their waste to a separate holding tank, and then they have a pumper company come. I think it's at least twice a week for them. They're fairly small, but twice a week from them and bring it to a different plant. So they're paying out the wazoo for that. So unfortunately, that's a typical response from the municipality. So now what? We got a lot of bad news so far. I'm sure you guys are asking, great, I know there's a problem, and I know the municipality is going to crack down on me, or at least they are thinking about it and might come in the future. What do I do? How do I combat that? And that's a great question to have. So number one is to understand your waste stream. That's to build some type of portfolio, try to understand what's actually coming in and going out of your facility. We'll go into that a little more in a minute. Number two is side streaming. Everyone should be doing some type of side streaming at their facility. It doesn't matter if you're a dude in your garage or you're a 100,000 barrel a year system. Everyone should be side streaming something, at least your spent grains, getting those out of the waste stream. Side streaming is simply the removal of high strength solids and waste from the waste stream. It's a separation, collection, removal of the solids, liquids, maybe some first rinses if you're trying to get down, knock down your BOD some more as well. Typically, what can happen is the brewery will team up with a local farmer. Pigs love spent grains, so farmers love getting free feed if they can. So if you guys aren't side streaming now, don't have that relationship, that's my number one recommendation is see if you can find a local farmer who will take your feed, take your spent grains and proven yeast and whatever else you can get out of your waste stream. Team up with them to take it from you. Typically, they'll take it for free, and so that just means you put in some type of collection system, dump it outside, they'll come with their trucks and haul it away. That's the best case scenario for that. If you can't do that, then looking at composting. If you can't do compost, then looking at landfill for your solids. Even with really good side streaming, getting rid of those solids out of your waste stream, you're still going to be in that 2,500 to 4,000 milligram per liter mark with your BOD. That's because your BOD is soluble. It's all dissolved. There's no way to screen it out. So you might need to do some type of pre-treatment even after side streaming, all of that. And we'll get into more of what those pre-treatments could be. So understanding your wastewater. Start by doing a deep dive analysis of your operations. Build a water and wastewater profile. So that's looking at your gallons per day coming into your facility and coming out of your facility. A lot of your stuff's going to leave as beer, but you're still going to produce quite a bit of wastewater. Look at that beer to wastewater, beer to water, beer to wastewater ratio. See if you can figure out what you're doing there. If you guys are hanging in that like 7+ range, it might be time to take a look at your operations, see where we can scale back on our water use. If you're in somewhere between 3 to 5, you're doing pretty good. You're not the best in the world, but you're doing much better than your traditional kind of people who are just dumping everything. Take some samples of your BOD, your TSS, your pH, etc. There's local testing facilities. This is the one right here in Albany. Adirondack Environmental does wastewater testing. So if you guys want to start building a profile, you can ship some samples off to them. If you are doing sampling, one thing I suggest is to not do what we call a grab samples. A grab sample is walking over to your tank, taking a scoop, and saying, okay, that's an accurate representation of my wastewater. Instead, if you can do something called composite sampling, that's much better. Composite sampling is taking periodic grabs, periodic sips of your wastewater over 24 or 48 hours, and then that will give you a more complete profile of what your waste stream is on average. The best composite samplers, in my opinion, are ones that are flow-based. So every 150 gallons or whatever coming out of your facility, it'll take a small sip and put it into a jar, and then say, okay, after 24 hours, I have X amount of water. The wastewater now can go and see what I actually have over time. The reason I like the flow-based versus just going out guessing on a time basis is because you'll get a more accurate representation. Because if you go by time, this hour you might be dumping a ton of waste, but the next hour you might just be flushing toilets. So if you go just on time, you're probably going to miss that larger chunk of waste. You're going to get a little less accurate. So anyway, that's my rant about if you're going to do sampling. As for composite sampling, if your town is going to do sampling on you, which many towns are doing now to understand what your waste is, ask them to do composite sampling rather than grab samples. Because you could get unlucky and they come in and take a scoop with a dump in true, and it's like, oh boy, this is an accurate representation, and now you guys on average dump out 10,000 BOD and 5,000 TSS or something. You need a fine. Or you can get really lucky and you just flush the toilets and they scoop it down and say, oh, you guys are at 400 BOD. It's really not that bad. But I wouldn't run the risk of being that guy when they scoop 10,000 out of you. Anyway, that's my rant. Look at your side stream processes. Yeah.
You mentioned composite sampling.
Yes.
Not to do it by time.
Yeah, I would, if you can, I would do it by flow. So you can put a flow meter and then say, okay, every 100 gallons, we're going to take a 10 milligram sip out of this waste stream. Something like that, rather than once an hour, we're going to take a sip.
Right.
I think that's a little bit more accurate of representation.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, our BOD is not time. Is that not a time-sensitive test, though?
It is. So BOD, it takes 5 days to do a BOD test. But if you have it sit in a jar for 24 hours, it's not that big of a deal. 36 or whatever, 72 hours. That's not that big of an issue. But it does take 5 days for them to do a test. To test it and then wait 5 days and see how much oxygen was consumed and then test it again. So unfortunately you cannot do instantaneous BOD testing. Some of the stuff you can test right on site if you want to, pH and TSS and those kind of things. What you can do is do COD testing, which is chemical oxygen demand. You can instantaneously test for that. And if you want to get a little more in-house testing and understand your stuff just your place, what I would suggest is do an instantaneous COD test, send off that same sample, at the same time, do your own COD testing in-house, do a BOD testing of that. When it comes back, you can do a correlation, and then do that a number of times, and you have a little bit of a correlation between COD and BOD, if you're trying to do stuff all in-house.
We did that for 9 months and got 0 correlation.
Oh, well, that is unfortunate.
So yeah, no, it didn't work.
Okay, well, then stick with whatever the lab says.
Yeah.
And on that topic, whatever you do in-house isn't going to count for what the municipality says your stuff is. It's like, that's a great process control in your own mind, but the town's not going to say, oh yeah, whatever you said is totally fine. They're going to want to do their own testing or get it approved by a lab or something like that. Yeah, any other questions? Okay, cool. Yeah, and do some associated costs with that. If you're getting surcharge, you're doing hauling fees, labor to side stream all this stuff. If you can do some cost down, some breakdown of that, you can see what's your waste stream actually costing you, how long would it take your ROI to system, those kind of things. Yeah, so again, looking at your facility, 10% of the waste that's coming out of your facility is actually from the brewing process, 90% is going to be coming from the cleaning itself. When you're rinsing your fermenters and all that kind of stuff, that's where most of your waste is coming from. Stop flushing everything down the drain. If you can get rid of your solids, please get rid of your solids. Spent grain should be the easiest, but if it isn't liquid, you can at least try to collect it, and that will help your numbers quite a bit. Segregate whatever comes down the drain. Same kind of idea. If you can recover it, see if you can use it somewhere else, give it the pigs, put it in compost, something like that. If you're not doing side streaming right now and you start side streaming, you'll see a reduction of BOD up to 50%. Most of you are probably already getting your solids, so even with intensive side streaming, you're not going to get that dramatic of a reduction of where you are currently, but it's still a good practice and you should still do it. Like I said, develop a true cost of value. How much is all your stuff costing you? Raw materials, water, energy, chemical usage, labor, all that jazz. So primary treatment, the first steps. The first step is that, like I said a little bit, looking at that TSS, is that interception of solids. That means screening and filtration. So put some screens and strainers to capture those solids and remove it from your waste stream. The next step would probably be equalization. All equalization would be is a tank that gives your waste time to equalize with itself. So that will help you with your pH, because you're going to be dropping beer, that's going to be acidic. You're going to be cleaning your tanks, that's going to be basic. And it should help you start to neutralize your waste stream already, so you're not going to hit the town with 10 pH one day and 3 pH the next day. It should equalize, maybe give them a more steady average of 5 or something like that. That will also help with your strength, because one day you're flushing toilets, the next day you're brewing beer, so you can get a little bit more equalization and strength as well. And it helps with the flow too, because what really can mess up your town and your on-site leach field is the surges that can come out of the brewery. So if you come up and just dump a fermenter, that's a lot of waste coming at one time, and that's going to really impact the system. But if it's more of a steady stream trickling in there, it's not going to upset the system as much as it would if it was just a big hit coming at one time. So equalization can help with that as well. We recommend 24 hours worth of storage if you're able to do it. pH adjustment, that will happen in the equalization tank. We could do inline pH adjustments, a little trickier to make sure that you actually know what's coming out of your facility. But try to get some accurate pH stuff on there, because like I said, that might be one of the first things your municipality really cares about. All right, so let's look at an example of a waste stream gone wrong. So this is the Woodstock Inn Brewery in Woodstock, New Hampshire. It's in the beautiful White Mountains, pretty close to where I live, actually. Picturesque little, classic ski town kind of thing. They started off as a 7-barrel brew house. They were cranking out the beer, so they upgraded to a 30-barrel brew house. And then within about a day or so, they overloaded their municipal system and totally killed it. So all the waste coming out of the facility went to the plant. The bugs and the microbes in the plant skyrocketed. They all suffocated and died, killed the plant. Now that plant has to go, scoop up new activated sludge, new healthy sludge from the new plant, drive back over, reseed the place, and give it time to repopulate. Woodstock ended up getting fines upwards of $10,000 a month until they were able to complete, some type of treatment system there to knock it down from their thousands of BODs coming out to below 300 milligrams per liter. So their initial response what their engineers called first recommended to do was dig up this parking lot here, put in 3 large tanks, and do some aeration in those tanks, and that should be good to go. Unfortunately, all that happened was those tanks went septic, and now you're aerating septic tanks, and so now the whole place smells like dookie, and then the whole town smells terrible, and the guy, like, we're talking to the brewers, and they're like, we smell it a couple miles out from town on our way to work. So unfortunately, all it did was take up the town. It didn't really give them any actual BOD treatment, or at least nothing that was even close to what they actually needed to do from there. So unfortunately, they spent a ton of money to do all that, but that's where Biogill came in. So Biogill is a trickling bioreactor, is the way they like to call themselves. I'll go a little bit more about what they are in a minute. But so their solution was to install 6 of these towers to bring their, so they were dumping out 3,000 gallons a day at 3,000 milligrams per liter, 3,500 milligrams per liter. They're probably more like 4,000 gallons a day at 4,000 milligrams per liter. But their plan was to put in 4 of these towers, let the biology that grows in these towers treat the waste before it leaves, make just to get it below 300 milligrams per liter, and then it would be safe to discharge it to the town. So they were able to put in 6 towers, and fortunately for them, they were able to totally eliminate their surcharge fees from the municipality. So what they do is they were able to reuse their initial big investment of all those tanks in the ground and turn them into storage tanks instead, and then they pump from those storage tanks up out of the ground through a little filter into we call this a day tank, that's what I call it at least. And then it gravitates into the Biogill system, and the Biogill system continually recircs over itself, and then they're able to treat their waste down to a sustainable level. So the way that Biogill works is, you can kind of see here a little bit, inside of this tower lives what they call gills. They kind of look like window curtains. It's essentially a terrarium for those microorganisms that would be in the treatment plant to live in a highly condensed area inside of the tower itself. So the way it works is it continually recirculates and trickles water over top of these gills. So pump from the recirc tank underneath, you can kind of see this black tank here. So there's a small pump in here that continually recircs over top of that tower, which has a very large biomass, as we call it, just a chunk of bugs living in there. And that continually recircs and trickles down, and that biomass eats up the nutrients, eats up the BOD in that waste stream before it goes to the town. What we care about with the Biogill system, we care about the pH, so we do pH adjustment right in the first tank, because it's microorganisms, they want to be somewhere between that happy 6 to 8 range to make sure they stay alive. And we care about the flow, so say, okay, we're producing 4,000 gallons a day. Okay, great, we'll equalize that over time, so let's see if we can trickle in over 24 hours. Let this thing work 24 hours long. That's kind of why we want 2 days worth of storage, so that a system can continually feed itself all day and all night, rather than just in batches. It helps with the recirc time in the tanks themselves. With the microorganisms, what they care about, same within a municipal plant, they care about the food that's coming into the BOD, and they care about the air. They need oxygen to survive. So the way that Biogill gets around the air problem, typically what happens at municipal plants, they put in these really big blowers and they try to pump air into these lagoons, which just isn't a really efficient way to get air into water, but it's the way that we have currently. They are able to bypass this through natural convection. So those microorganisms in there are going to break down, and in that breakdown process, when they break down nutrients, they generate heat. So there's going to be it's going to pull the cold air from the bottom and discharge hot air from the top. And that's just a really efficient way to get air into the system without needing excessive blowers, which means you can save energy costs with that. Biogill's modular as well, so let's say you guys are in your barn right now brewing, and say, okay, I'm gonna be here for a year. Next year I'm planning on going to a warehouse, and I'll go from there, go from there, go from there. I'm producing 1,000 barrels this year. Next year I want to produce 5,000, next to keep going. This type of wastewater system can grow with your facility. So you can start with one tower, let's say, and say, okay, hey, I doubled in size, now I need to double my treatment capacity, add another tower. So it can grow with you, and you can spread out those costs over time rather than something that needs to be built for your size, and if it's not your size, then it's going to either starve or you're going to overload it. So having something modular is a really helpful system. Another technology that's out there is called Eneru. It's an MBR, a membrane bioreactor. Is actually here, James Hotchkiss. If you want to get really technical or more technical on his stuff, James can help you out. James, yeah. They're upstairs as well. And so they can talk about it much clearer than I can. We like to call the Eneru system the F-150 of MBRs. MBRs, for those who aren't familiar, it's a proven technology. It's been around for a while, and they're in thousands of wastewater treatment facilities. But oftentimes they can be Ferraris, very expensive, all the bells and whistles, stuff that the average person just doesn't need or really care about. Eneru, on the other hand, has been able to simplify the technology and the very high treatment capacity of an MBR into something that anyone can run. They have stuff in the Caribbean where, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially you're able to send all the equipment there, teach a local operator, say, oh, come much over Skype, like this is how you put it together, this is how you run it, and they can run it themselves without really any prior training. So we really like Eneru as well, because just like Biofuel, it is modular, so you can start with a smaller system, and as you grow, you can add more units to it as well and grow into that. And a really cool thing about Eneru is that it can get down to reuse quality effluent. So that means that you can treat your waste down to where if you want to reuse it back in your beer, we'll have to do a couple extra steps probably, but we can get all the way down to at least gray water, where you can reuse your wastewater back into your facility for your toilets or whatever pretty easily. We're looking at stuff like in Arizona possibly for reuse quality down there, where they can put it back onto their golf courses and things like that. So if you're looking for something like that, Eneru is a great option for you. Both of these are fairly comparable in price, but if you want to get down to the reuse quality, Eneru is the way to go, 100%. Yeah, just a quick diagram. It's compact. Both of these are kind of turnkey solutions. They're very automated, user-friendly. We try to make our systems as operator-friendly as possible because we want you guys to be able to brew your beer and not have to worry about wastewater. Unlike something like an anaerobic digester, one of those big things, you're going to have to hire staff full-time to run stuff like that. We're trying to get away from that so you can still brew beer and manage your wastewater system at the same time, quite simply. So, in summary, brewery wastewater, it's no joke. You should understand your process, understand what's coming out of your facility, especially if you meet your numbers before your municipality or EPA or whoever jumps down your throat and say, hey, we've already done our testing. You're already kind of looking at this. That's something that I would really strongly recommend is have a plan in place now before someone jumps down your throat on stuff. Because if they come and say, hey, you're killing our waste plant, we're going to come down, we're going to charge you a ton of money, and say, okay, we've already been thinking about that. Here's our plan, even if you're not really planning a plan. But here's our plan. And it's like, okay, hey, they've been thinking about it. They have a plan in place. Let's not kill them right now. We'll give them a year or two or whatever to figure this thing out in the meantime. So that's a really helpful way to calm the fear or aggression or whatever that can come from municipality crackdowns. Like I said, municipalities are cracking down on breweries all over the place. Unfortunately, breweries are just an easy target for them. You guys pop into towns, and towns are really excited to have you, but they don't understand the impact that's going to happen on their treatment plant, so they overreact the other way. Side stream. If you're not doing it now, please start doing it. That's the number one way to knock down your BOD, your TSS, all these numbers pretty easily. And the least expensive option of everything is the side stream stuff right now. If good housekeeping is not enough, if the side stream is not enough, then look into a pre-treatment system, because you can only get so far with that side streaming. If you're looking to a pre-treatment, BioGrill and Eneru are great options for you. They both treat really high BOD, better than pretty much all the competition out there. They can go up to 95%, 98%. Eneru can get down to non-detectable limits in that water if you need to. It can be paired with existing systems, so if you guys already have something at your plant, we can add these systems to the front end or the back end to increase that capacity. They're both scalable and modular, so you can start with something small. You don't have to put a ton of money into it today when you're planning on growing, 3 times your size in 5 years or something. You can have that grow with you and spread your costs. They're both simple to maintain, so anyone should be able to do it, whether you have any background in wastewater or not. Economical, they're some of the cheapest stuff on the market right now. All of it is an investment. It's not, nothing's free. But for the stuff that you find out there, it's one of the most cost-friendly options available. And then you're looking down to get your waste all the way down to reuse quality effluent, and is probably the way to go. But yeah, that is my presentation. Kind of breeze through that. So if you guys have any questions, let them rip. Happy to answer. Yeah.
We have a big issue of getting rid of spent hops.
Yep.
So we're side streaming it and then getting it hauled off-site. What are options we'd love to take the hop sludge to a solid, get rid of it in solid.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, you're going to be looking at some screening options for that. For both Eneru and BioGrill in the first place, before those, you're going to want to put some type of screening system anyway. The tighter the screen, the more residue you're going to collect versus water. So options could be a rotary drum screen, a static screen, bag filters, but those can get clogged easily if it's going to be taking up a big chunk. But those are probably my first 3 to look at: rotary, static, and drum.
Just kind of add on to that, are you already able to separate it from everything else?
Yeah, we're able to separate it for the most part, and it goes into a big storage tank, and then it gets.
Because I know as long as it doesn't have yeast in it, you can feed it cows. The hops of it actually.
Have you tried that?
But not, I don't know about
Cows don't like it that much.
Yeah, cows. I guess it depends on how much.
Yeah.
It's actually good for the cows and cuts down on the amount of cow emissions.
We have somebody take away all this spent grain out, and we would put little bits of it in there to see how far we can go with it.
And no diet.
Can't really go that far.
No, all right.
Yeah.
My question's on the BioGrill.
Yes.
Is there a way to test like the concentration or the level of the microbes, or would that be tested by performance, I guess?
Yeah, mainly tested by performance.
So you would test I guess, and then I want to know the flow rate.
Oh, okay.
What the flow rate is through like one of those BioGrills, or if there's different models or something.
Yeah, so the way that we would size a BioGrill or an Eneru is looking at your less of a flow rate and more of a BOD loading. Because you could be pumping out 1,000 gallons a day, but it could be practically clean water, and so you don't really need that much of a treatment system. Or you get 1,000 gallons a day at 20,000 BOD, and you're going to need more of a system to treat all of that. So it's more of the BOD loading versus the flow rate would be my not so helpful answer.
And so like, yeah, I got you. And then, I guess what would the process look like if you killed all those microbes?
Yeah, so like to restart it kind of thing. Yeah, so that actually happened at the BioGrill has a juice producing facility, and somehow I think the caustic in their pH adjustment system was empty, and so they dumped essentially just straight lemon juice through the system, and it came to like pH of like 3 or something, killed the microbes. So what happens in that system is kind of shut down the system for a minute, figure out what went wrong. First of all, like, our caustic is empty. That's a pretty easy fix. Put that back in. But we actually recommend not seeding the BioGrills. When I say seeding, that's giving it microbes to generate at the beginning, like taking activated sludge and dumping on top. There's actually enough microbes in your waste stream already that it's going to start seeding itself. So we like to plug it in and just let it run. And within 2 weeks, you should have full biomass growth. So if something happens, something goes totally wrong and it kills all the bugs in there, fix the problem first and just let it run with the fixed waste coming through, and it should reseed itself in a couple of days. Yeah.
I was going to say that the bacteria replicate every 2 hours, so it doesn't take long for the biomass to build back up. So you start with a very weak biomass, and you figure out that every 2 hours these things are going to double in concentration, so it doesn't take long to get back up to an active biomass.
And then dumping, so from the biogill to your wastewater, is that all manual dumping or can that be automated?
Yeah, it's all actually just gravity flow through. So if you put a gallon in the front end, you're going to put a gallon out the back end. So that's where we care about the...
That automatically though?
Yeah,
as it comes in, it automatically.
As it comes in, it automatically just kind of gravities from the one biogill tower to the next, and then it will gravity out to the town.
And at that point, it would be, I guess if it was sized correctly, at your certain
Yeah.
DOD.
Yeah, whatever you're trying
I
to
was gonna say, because if the microbe dies or something, would it still allow to flow
It would
through?
still allow waste to flow through. Yeah, you would have to put...
Is there like alarms or something you could do on the output to monitor?
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
You can put different sensors on there that are hooked up to an alarm system that will send out an alarm to you and say, hey, something's off here,
Yeah.
dissolved oxygen or whatever is out of whack, and come check the system out because something went terribly wrong. There are systems you can put in to monitor all that. Yeah, and that's Jim Hotchkiss, by the way. He's the owner of Eneru. If you want to get more technical on that stuff, he's forgotten more about wastewater than I'll ever know. So.
Where's Andrew based on?
Fort Erie, Ontario, 5 minutes from downtown Buffalo. If you can cross the border.
We're running an MBR system based out of you guys from Paradox. We've been having trouble keeping the pH constant level because of all the low pH that we're putting in there. And we have the dosing tanks. I was just curious if there's any other way to correct pH besides dumping a bunch of caustic into it,
Yeah, that's been our most proven way. What issue you might be running into is depends on how large of a tank you're trying to treat.
Pretty big. I don't have the number off the top.
Yeah, but it's a lot easier if you're trying to treat, a 10, a 5, 2, 5, or 10,000 gallon tank or something like that.
Yeah.
You're going to get this thing called hysteresis. So that just means that, okay, your pH comes in, it's really low, and you try to treat it, and it's going to go really high, you do the treating, and it's going to go really low. Then a new wave comes in, it's going to kind of have this wave. And over time, that wave should kind of equal out. So that's the hysteresis. It's a lot easier to treat pH in a smaller area than trying to treat a whole 10,000 gallon tank or something one time, instead of doing it in like a 500 gallon tank. Because once it's treated there, it shouldn't really adjust. There shouldn't really be anything in your waste stream to really freak out the pH.
So we had like a grit tank before all that. It would be like to treat it before, take samples before it hits the big tanks, and then try to treat it then, rather than treating the big tanks, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's tough to say without seeing your system, but the smaller the tank, the easier it is to do the pH adjustment.
Right.
The problem with the smaller tanks, though, is sometimes you do get the caustic hit and the acidic hit, and so you end up treating a lot more acid and base. What we've done in a few systems is we've put in a serpentine loop, and we're actually doing a high velocity recirculation of the tank, but through a serpentine loop, and the sensors in there, so you're actually getting your serpentine.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
That makes it. It's fairly inexpensive, but if you have all the pH adjustment equipment, all of it is putting in, $100 worth of PVC pipe in.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just like going through caustic, so I'm like,
Yeah, that's
figure
right.
it out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And we also like have a CIP skid, so that diverts most of the caustic and acid for the most part, but it's still a lot of high pH water going through, and the beer is already gone. So I was just curious.
Are those units okay outdoors or?
Where we are, Unfortunately, they're not necessarily outdoor things. If the biofuel, we want it inside some type of, doesn't have to be, we wouldn't put it in your tap room, but inside some type of shed or something. Similar with the energy system, the actual MBR itself, we would want it in some type of indoor. Yeah.
Is that just for like freezing purposes?
Yeah, just for freezing purposes. If we were, in Arizona or something, we can put it outside, but just because, we're up in the north, it's going to get negative 15 or something during the winter, so.
The biological system,
Yeah.
you go outside because it's exothermic. So
I'm
they
sorry?
have them outside and penguins and things like that. The membranes should be inside, because if you ever shut it off and they freeze, then it's toast.
Yeah, you have a lot of water exposed to cold air, so, yeah. And it's, the biofuel also, as a trickling filter, doesn't love the cold. The colder the wastewater is, the less treatment you're gonna get. But if it's in an enclosed space, it shouldn't be as bad.
Is there a certain temperature that you want like the microbes at?
If we could have a perfect world, the hotter the better coming through. We'd love it to be above 60, 65 coming through the biofuel system. Below that, it can start losing some treatment capacity. Yeah.
The optimum temperature is 34 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
Anything above 40, they die. And at 5 Celsius, they just don't work.
With those being modular systems, what is a single one cost for the biofuel?
Yeah, the biofuel right now currently retails for about 18,000. So it's not inexpensive. But yeah, that's about the current going rate, I guess, for one of those. And then you would want some pH adjustment around it and some screening and stuff like that as well. So it just depends on your size of the brewery, what you're trying to treat down to, how many towers you might need to get there. Yeah.
What's the expectancy of power hours?
If you have a power, I've seen at the biofuel system a tower not run for months and it still has some type of bacteria in there. But the good thing about it is that even if they're all dead, they come back online quickly. Like Jim was saying, they replicate 2 eggs a day, kind of thing, so, or an hour. So it's pretty quick. Even if something terrible goes on, they come back online pretty quickly. Yeah.
You guys do anything with the food service uncovered? Like, people that clean a lot of dishes that have food waste on them, generating that kind of wastewater?
I haven't yet, but it's something that's definitely that can be feasible. For a lot of food services, you're going to have additional thing called fog, which is fat, oils, and grease. So you have to be aware of that too. If you guys have any kitchens at your facility too, you're going to be dealing with a little bit of fog, fat, oils, and grease. For small folks, that is more or less negated by having some type of grease trap at your facility. But yeah, like we've done stuff for like a dairy processing kind of thing, and that's one of their main issues is fats or grease, because dairy is like all fat. So yeah.
And the system is still operative.
Yeah, in one sense, it's all what you're looking for is BOD and TSS and COD. So it kind of, in one sense, it's kind of all the same-ish between beer and different food processes. What you might need to look into is just making sure you have the right ratio of nutrients in there. For some places, like if Bible was put out a winery, per se, we would have to add additional, I think it's nitrogen, to it to make sure that the bugs have a happy ratio between nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, I think, to keep them happy. So it's just analyzing the waste stream and doing that. But there's enough back data to kind of be able to guesstimate what the ratio, where this certain waste stream would be lacking in nutrients. Yeah.
Have you seen anyone in terms of the funding be able to get anything through an institution or organization or subsidies or anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't done it particularly through my own thing. I know a lot of people are waiting for ARPA money right now. In Vermont, we're working with a dairy that is waiting for ARPA money on pretreatment. Vermont, I haven't looked into New York, but I know Vermont is getting a specific amount dedicated to pre-treatment projects. So they're hoping they can pull from that. The brewery in Arizona we're working with they were initially working with University of Arizona, or Arizona University, whatever it is. And they're planning on getting some funding through that if they were going to go all the way to reuse quality, but then they kind of extended that plan. So I haven't worked with them specifically, but it's not out of the realm possibility. Yeah, if you have a good town, that would be something I would try to push on them too. Hey, we know we're a problem. Can you help us not be a problem? We'd love to like not have this impact on our facility, but it's a chunk of change coming through to put these installed. There's financing available for all this stuff too, if you want to look down that road. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, how much changes?
Like the smell?
Yeah, so gas.
If it's starting to smell, like, I'm talking about the anaerobic system, really for either of them, the smell is pretty negligible. I wouldn't want to put them in the tap room because they're going to get some type of stank coming off, but it's nothing like standing next to an actual treatment plant where kids are going septic and gross. So, but if you're starting to smell things that like smell like this is raw sewage, that means something probably went wrong with the biology. You need to check something out there. But for the most part, if you put it in your, I just wouldn't put it in the tap room essentially, but you're not going to smell it unless you're in the room with it. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I think that's all we got. We got a couple more questions.